You know that specific feeling when you finally finish a massive project?
Oh, definitely.
Like maybe you've just renovated your kitchen, or I don't know, maybe you've launched a huge piece of software. The dust settles, you cut the ribbon, you flip the switch, and everyone cheers. You just think, finally, I am done.
It's a great feeling. But in the world of major engineering and heavy construction, that moment, the ribbon cutting, is usually when the facility manager starts to hyperventilate.
Right. Because done for the construction team and ready for the operations team are, well, two completely different realities. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the invisible infrastructure that bridges that gap.
Mhm.
But we aren't talking about concrete or steel or, high voltage cables today. We are talking about the documentation.
Which honestly can weigh as much as the steel if you print it all out.
It really can.
Ah.
We are looking at a document titled E2.16 Employer Requirement Handover. Now, I know, it sounds dry. It sounds like the kind of PDF you just accidentally download and immediately send to the trash. But when you actually read it,
It's a roadmap.
it's a beast. It is the absolute rule book for how a contractor hands over the brain of a project to the employer.
That is the perfect way to frame it. I mean, this document is the bridge between building mode and running mode. Think about it. If you build a billion-dollar factory, but you don't hand over the deep knowledge of how to run it, maintain it, fix it, you haven't really built a factory. You've built a very expensive, very dangerous statue.
A statue that might explode if you press the wrong button.
Precisely. And without this documentation, you are essentially flying blind from day one.
So our mission for this deep dive is to decode this rigorous structured process. And I have to say, looking at the source material, I was just shocked by the sheer volume of it. They break the documentation down into these things called books. And we aren't talking about a trilogy here. We're talking about book 0 all the way through book 7.
Yeah, it is an entire library. But there is a very specific logic to it. This isn't just bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy. Think of this documentation as the nervous system of the project. The source material outlines a structure that ensures absolutely nothing gets lost in translation.
So let's unpack this book system. The document calls them delivery books.
Yeah.
What is the big picture strategy here? Like, why split it up this way?
The core distinction the document makes, and this is really important for anyone managing assets, is between project management documentation and technical documentation.
Okay, so that's basically how we manage the job versus how the thing actually works.
Right. Project management documentation is the history of the construction. It's the receipts, the emails, the schedules, the safety logs. Technical documentation is the user manual, the blueprints, the test results. One is looking backward at the build, and the other is looking forward to operations.
And there's a little detail in the source that I found fascinating, and I really want to highlight it. It says, all these documents, thousands of pages, have to be properly named, numbered, coded, and formatted to fit into the employer's asset management system.
That is critical. In the old days, a contractor might just dump a truckload of unorganized binders on the owner's desk and say, "Good luck, see ya." This document strictly forbids that. It requires actual data integration.
So it's not just a file dump.
No, absolutely not. The contractor has to use the employer's specific coding system. So imagine you are the plant manager 5 years from now. A specific valve leaks.
You don't want to hunt through 50 binders for that.
Exactly. You want to type that valve's ID code into your system, and boom, up pops the installation guide, the test certificate from the factory, and the maintenance log.
That makes perfect sense. It turns the documentation into a searchable database.
Exactly.
Okay, let's get into the weeds. I want to walk through these books because the specific requirements are wild. Let's look at the first cluster, the project management cluster. This is books 1 and 2.
Book 1 is your foundation. The source calls it standards, codes of practice, and handover procedures.
This seems pretty standard. It's the rules you agreed to play by.
It is. It includes the contract agreement, the amendments, the list of industry norms. If you used a specific ISO standard for welding or a specific DIN standard for electrical safety, that standard is listed in Book 1. It establishes the legal and technical reality. It's essentially the constitution of the project.
But then we get to Book 2, project management documentation. The source describes this as the execution log. And looking at the list of what goes in here, it's literally everything.
It really is. Book 2 is the story of the build. It covers resources, so who worked on it, what materials were used. It covers costs. It covers HSE safety, health, and environment.
There was one line item in Book 2 that really caught my eye. Daily permits to work. That seems incredibly granular for a handover document on a massive project. Why does the owner need to know that on a Tuesday, 3 years ago, Bob had a permit to do hot work on level 4.
It comes down to liability and traceability. Imagine 3 years from now, a fire breaks out in a cable duct. The insurance company investigates. They suspect the fire started because of a bad weld made during construction. They ask, was the proper safety protocol followed when these cables were welded?
And if you don't have the paper,
You're in serious trouble. But if you have Book 2, you can pull up the specific daily permit to work from that specific day 3 years ago. You can prove that the area was inspected, the fire watch was in place, and the safety officer signed off.
so Book 2 is your shield.
Exactly. It's the we did it right defense. If something goes wrong later, Book 2 is the proof that the contractor followed the rules during construction. Without it, you're just guessing.
Moving on to Book 3, this is titled Approval Documentation. Now, I assume this just meant a folder with all the building permits.
It's much more than that. The source is very specific here. It says Book 3 contains the applications for approval, the approvals themselves, and, this is the kicker, the documentary evidence of fulfillment of all the conditions.
Oh, interesting. Can you explain that?
Sure, so if the city gives you a permit to build a power plant, they rarely just say yes. They say yes, but you must only work between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., or yes, but you must monitor the groundwater quality every week.
So the permit is conditional.
Precisely. And Book 3 needs to contain the proof that you actually followed those conditions. It's not enough to just show the permit. You have to show the groundwater logs that prove you respected the permit. Without that evidence, the permit might technically be void, and the facility could be shut down.
That is a crucial distinction. It's closing the loop on compliance. Okay, so we've covered the management, the rules, and the legal stuff. Now let's get to the physical reality of the project, the handover meet. We are talking technical documentation, Books 4 and 5.
This is where we transition from how we managed it to what we actually built.
Book 4 is test and verification.
The proof of quality. This includes EU conformity declarations, public authority acceptance inspections, and verifications of quality features.
And the source mentions this covers testing during manufacturing, installation, erection, and commissioning. So it's the whole life cycle of the testing.
Right. It's not just does it turn on at the end. It's did the steel for this beam pass the stress test at the factory before it was even shipped? And then did the weld pass inspection when we installed it? Book 4 aggregates all those pass stamps into one place.
Then we have Book 5, Design and Construction.
These are your blueprints, the technical documents on the structure and the function of the equipment. If Book 4 is does it work, Book 5 is what is it?
And there's a note in the source that says both Book 4 and Book 5 are to be divided in sections based on the sequence of handover documentation.
That implies flow. You don't just hand over Book 4 as a giant lump sum at the very end. You hand over the sections of Book 4 that correspond to the parts of the plant you are actually finishing. It mirrors the physical progress. As you finish a cooling system, you hand over the docs for the cooling system.
Which brings us to the part that I think is most relevant to the people who will actually work in this facility. The user's manual, Book 6 and 7.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Book 6 is user guides and manuals. Pretty self-explanatory. User guides, execution procedures, operation and maintenance manuals. It's the instruction booklet you get with your toaster, but for a massive industrial plant.
But then there is Book 7, operational documentation.
I want to spend a minute on this because the expert in me says this is arguably the most critical book for the future owner, but it sounds so similar to Book 6. What is the actual difference?
I agree completely. It is the most critical. Most people confuse Book 6 and Book 7. They think, I have the manual, I'm good. But Book 6 tells you how the machine is supposed to work. It's the theory. Book 7 tells you how this specific machine actually behaved when they turned it on.
The source says Book 7 includes records before the official taking over. This means data from the trial operation phase.
Yes. And look at the specific list of what's in there. Error messages and logs of operational use. Documentation of the change of setting values, and my favorite, completed and failed recurring checks.
Failed checks. That's the surprising part. Why would I, as the owner, want a book full of failed checks? I want to hear that everything went perfectly.
No, absolutely not, because it is the medical history of the patient. If you buy a used car, you don't just want the owner's manual, you want the service history. You want to know that the transmission acted up 3 times during the test drive. Book 7 captures the infant mortality phase of the equipment.
That is a great analogy.
If the contractor ran a test 10 times and it failed the first 9 times and passed on the 10th, Book 7 ensures you know about those 9 failures. It tells you where the weak points are. It tells you that maybe that sensor is finicky or that valve tends to stick if it's cold.
So Book 6 is the theory and Book 7 is the reality.
Exactly. It also includes documentation of the change of setting values, which implies that if they had to tweak the sensitivity of an alarm to stop it from going off every 5 minutes, that tweak is recorded.
Oh, that's huge, because if you don't have that record...
If you don't have that record and you reset the system to factory defaults a year later, you're going to have alarms screaming at you and you won't know why. Book 7 protects the tuned state of the machine.
That is incredible insight. It's preventing the "why is this alarm screaming" scenario on day 1.
It's the difference between a smooth operation and a chaotic one.
Now let's talk about the timeline, because you can't just drop all 7 of these books on the desk on the final day.
No, and the source is very strict about this. There is a Table 1 handover documentation sequence. It outlines a cascade.
I see that. For example, Book 6, the user guides, must be delivered 2 months prior to test on completion.
Which makes sense. You need to read the manual before you try to test the machine. You can't verify the operation if you don't know how to operate it.
And Book 4A, fabrication documentation, is due 1 month prior to a date to be agreed. But the key here is that it's staggered.
And there is a column in that table called red marking.
Yes, I've heard this term on construction sites. What exactly is red marking?
Red marking, or sometimes redlining, is the industry term for reality corrections. You submit the initial docs. Then the engineers go out to the site and realize, oh, we actually moved this pipe 2 feet to the left to avoid a column. They take a red pen and mark that change directly on the physical drawing.
So the blueprint says one thing, but the red pen shows what actually happened.
Exactly. The red marking phase is the process of updating the documentation to match the as-built reality. If you skip this, your maps are fiction.
So the timeline isn't just submit. It's submit, check, red mark, update, final submit.
Correct. And the document gives the employer massive leverage here. It states explicitly that all handover documentation shall be submitted and accepted prior to issue of a notice of completion.
Wow. So no docs, no completion.
Which means no final payment. It forces the contractor to take the paperwork as seriously as the construction. You cannot get paid and walk away until the books are balanced. Literally.
That solves the problem of the contractor vanishing into the sunset, leaving you with a box of unorganized receipts.
Ideally, yes. It holds their wallet hostage until the library is finished.
Now, we live in a digital world. Is this all physical paper?
It's a hybrid. The source talks about an EDMS, an electronic document management system.
And the contractor has to set up specific digital folders that match the book structure.
Right. And there is a flowchart in Section 4 that walks through the approval process. It's a loop. Contractor submits. Employer checks completeness. If yes, start review.
But the final output listed in that flowchart is interesting. It lists portable storage device, final native files, final pictures and videos, and hard copy documentation.
Native files is a key term there. That means you don't just want the PDF of the drawing. You want the original CAD file. You want the editable version.
Why does that matter so much?
Right, to modify. If you only get the PDF, it's like getting a picture of a text document. You can't edit it easily. If you want to expand the plant in 5 years, you need the native CAD files to build upon the existing design. If you don't have them, you might have to redraw the whole plant from scratch.
That would be a nightmare. And there's a specific step in the flowchart called hard copy, soft copy completeness, and comparison check. And the decision diamond says identical.
That is a pain point for so many projects.
Yeah.
You look at the PDF on your screen and it says one thing. You go to the shelf and pull the physical binder and it says something else. This document requires a specific quality control step to ensure the physical paper matches the digital file exactly.
It seems tedious, but I guess if the internet goes down, or the server crashes...
Or if you're out in the field with a tablet and the battery dies, or if there's a cyber attack, you need to trust that the binder on the shelf is the absolute truth. It's your ultimate backup.
Before we wrap up, I noticed one little yellow box at the bottom of the diagram in the source. Documentation for spare parts.
Ah, yes, the unsung hero.
The source says documentation for spare parts delivered is an integral part of the handover documentation.
It's easily overlooked.
Yeah.
Everyone focuses on the big turbine or the giant generator, but the documentation for the O-rings, the gaskets, the replacement filters, that is vital.
Because things break.
Exactly. When a part breaks 2 years in, you need to know exactly which spare part to order. Not just a medium-sized rubber gasket, but part number XJ99 from supplier Y.
And if that isn't in the handover,
You are guessing. And guessing in high-stakes engineering is expensive and dangerous. You end up ordering parts that don't fit, or worse, parts that fail under pressure.
so to recap our journey here, we started with Book 1, the rules. We went through Book 2, the execution log, Book 3, the legal proof, Books 4 and 5, the technical reality, and Books 6 and 7, the operation manual and the history.
It is a comprehensive system. It turns a construction project into a manageable asset.
And it essentially forces the contractor to prove their work at every step. It's not about trust, it's about verification.
Trust, but verify, as the saying goes. But in this case, it's verify, document, catalog, and then maybe we'll trust you enough to sign the check.
I love that. It really changes your perspective on what it means to finish a job. It's not finished when the building is up, it's finished when the knowledge is transferred.
Absolutely. The building is the hardware, the documentation is the software. You need both to run.
Now, here's a final thought for you to chew on. We talked about Book 7 containing error messages and failed recurring checks from the trial phase. We framed this as a medical history. But think about the psychology of that for a second.
Oh, on.
A contractor naturally wants to look perfect. They want to hand over a pristine report that says everything worked perfectly, we are geniuses, pay us. But this document forces them to record their failures.
It does. It forces transparency.
Why would an employer fight so hard for a record of failure? It's not just to blame the contractor later. It's because those failures are the map to the machine's personality. If you hide the failures, you are hiding the risks.
That's a profound point. A perfect record is suspicious. If someone hands me a log for a complex system that says 0 errors, I know they are lying. A record that shows the struggle, the adjustments, and the errors is authentic. It allows the new owner to understand the vulnerability of the system from day one.
Exactly. It's better to know that the engine stalls when it's cold, rather than finding out on the first freezing morning.
100%.
So, next time you finish a project, ask yourself, are you just handing over the result? Or are you handing over the struggle, the errors, and the lessons learned? Where is your Book 7?
That is the exact question we should all be asking.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.